The moment was mundane, just a quiet evening in their shared apartment, the hum of a kettle boiling in the background. Ethan was looking for a receipt to file his taxes when he opened her bedside drawer. What he found instead stopped the air in his lungs. A folded piece of hotel stationery, creased but unmistakable, bore a logo from a downtown boutique hotel. The date? 3 weeks ago. The room? Booked for 2 adults. But that weekend, she told him she was in Chicago, on a business trip. Ethan blinked, heart thundering in his chest as 1,000 fragmented thoughts rushed forward. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the slip again, hoping it would vanish or show something else. But it didn't. It stayed the same. Proof. Undeniable. Cold. And his world shifted from the comfort of trust into the gutting silence of betrayal. In that moment, something inside him broke, but not loud or sudden. It was a quiet, shattering kind of grief. Just a week before the discovery, Ethan had kissed her goodbye at the airport. She smiled, touched his cheek, and told him she'd call once she landed. And she did. Sent photos from the conference. Selfies with colleagues. A blurry skyline from a hotel window. He remembered how warm he felt then, how lucky he thought he was to have someone so driven. He saved one of those photos. It was of her sitting at a hotel bar, laughing, a half-finished martini in her hand. Now he studied it again, zoomed in, caught something he hadn't noticed before. A reflection. In the glass behind her. A man's silhouette, leaning in just a little too close. Ethan had believed her completely. The memory of that trust now mocked him. The worst part wasn't the lie. It was that he never saw it coming. Love had made him blind, and she'd used that blindness to perfection. Ethan sat alone on the living room couch, the lights off, the TV flickering static from an unfinished movie. He clutched the receipt like a lifeline and stared at nothing. Every beat of silence screamed louder than words. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was unraveling. His mind traced back to all the late meetings, the no-signal excuses, the mysterious perfume on her clothes she said was from a colleague's hug. He believed all of it. And now, in the quiet aftermath, he wondered why. Was it love? Was it fear? Or had he just chosen the comfort of trust over the pain of doubt? The receipt burned in his hand, a symbol that everything he knew about their life together might be a fiction. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat, quiet and hollow, while the truth settled like dust around him. The front door clicked open. Her heels clacked softly against the floor as she called out, "I'm home." Ethan didn't move. She walked into the living room, puzzled at the darkness, until she saw him, silent, face unreadable. "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head. He looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman he adored, standing there with shopping bags and a casual smile, like everything was normal. He said nothing, only held up the receipt. Her face changed. Not shock. Not confusion. Just stillness. A long, practiced pause. And then she said, "Where did you find that?" Her tone wasn't panicked. It was measured. And in that moment he realized, this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. And she was already prepared to defend it. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. The silence was its own language, accusation, confession, heartbreak, and regret all layered in one breathless space. She set the bags down gently, as if afraid of waking something monstrous. Ethan's jaw clenched. His fingers loosened around the receipt, letting it float to the floor between them. It landed like a verdict. She took a slow breath. "I can explain," she began, but the words were airless. Ethan stood then, not in anger, but in mourning. He looked at her, not as a lover, but as a stranger who wore her face. "Don't," he said. Just one word. Form, die. Final. Dot. She didn't reach for him. Didn't cry. And that hurt more than anything. Because in that moment, it was clear. He had loved her more than she had ever loved him. Ethan lay awake long after she went to bed. Her breathing was steady, peaceful, almost cruel in its calmness. He stared at the ceiling, heart a storm. Now that the illusion had shattered, memories resurfaced in brutal clarity. The late texts left unanswered. The last-minute trips that always just came up. The hollow laughter during dinner. He remembered asking once, "Are you happy with me?" And how she paused just a little too long before replying. Back then he thought he was overthinking. Now he knew better. These weren't isolated moments. They were a pattern, pieces of a puzzle he had refused to see. The bed they shared now felt foreign. Her warmth beside him felt like theft. He turned away from her, heart heavy, realizing he didn't lose her tonight. He had been losing her for months. He just hadn't wanted to admit it. 2 months ago, James, his oldest friend, had tried to warn him. "There's something off," he had said, choosing his words carefully. "I saw her the other night downtown. She said she was with coworkers, but she ducked when she saw me." Ethan brushed it off, laughing nervously. "She hates attention, man. You're reading into things." But James' eyes had held a seriousness that Ethan had ignored. Now, Ethan sat across from him at a quiet cafe, the receipt lying between them like a scar. James didn't say, "I told you so." He just exhaled, reached for the coffee cup, and said, "You okay?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know what hurts more, what she did, or how blind I was to it." James leaned forward, voice low. "Being loyal doesn't make you weak, but ignoring your gut, that's what breaks you." Ethan sat at his desk, scrolling through old texts and voice notes. Her voice rang out, laughing, confident, spinning tales of meetings, clients, stress, and cities she never truly visited. The details were always elaborate. That's what made it believable. She knew how to sound busy, how to evoke sympathy. "The Wi-Fi's crap here," she'd say. Or, "We're networking late, don't wait up." He remembered once asking for a video call, and she'd declined, saying her battery was dying. Now, he listened again, her words hollow, almost rehearsed. There were no signs then. Or maybe there were, he just didn't want to find them. She had always been good with words. But looking back, Ethan realized something chilling. She never talked about missing him. Not once. And somehow, he never noticed that until now. It had always been there. On her clothes, her tone, the way she flinched when he asked about her day. A perfume she never wore when they went out. New lingerie he never saw her wear at home. Little gaps in stories that never aligned. Ethan wandered the apartment now like an archaeologist uncovering ruins. Her closet, once familiar, now felt like evidence. A scarf with unfamiliar cologne. A gift box hidden behind a stack of shoes. He picked it up. It was a bracelet, still in its case, no tag, no note. She never mentioned it. Never wore it. That's when it hit him. She wasn't careless. She just didn't care if he found out. Maybe she thought he'd never look. Or maybe she was waiting for the confrontation. Either way, this wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was systematic. And it had been unfolding right in front of him. He remembered it vividly now. Just 2 weeks ago. They sat across from each other at dinner. She was distracted, checking her phone between bites. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. She smiled, too fast. "Just work." He nodded, but something in her voice was brittle. "Still going to Chicago next week?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Yeah, same hotel as last time." That was the moment. Right there. That's when she looked him in the eye and told the biggest lie of their lives. He had smiled back, trusting her. Even offered to drive her to the airport. And she'd said, "No, it's okay. I'll take a cab." That moment played on a loop in his mind now. The moment she chose to protect the lie over protecting him. And he realized, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was betrayal wrapped in affection. That's what made it cruel. Ethan wasn't looking for vengeance. He was searching for clarity. After a sleepless night, he opened her laptop, something he had never done before. Her passwords were saved, her browser history intact. She hadn't even tried to hide it. Hotel confirmations. Calendar entries. Oh, a dinner reservation under his name, but made while she was supposedly in Chicago. The pieces fell into place faster than he wanted. He copied everything into a folder labeled Truth. His hands shook, not from rage but from a slow, sickening realization. She never thought he'd look. Because she trusted his silence. Trusted that he wouldn't question her. And for the longest time he hadn't. But now, armed with timelines and digital fingerprints, Ethan knew he wasn't paranoid. He was finally awake. And every click brought him closer to the version of her she never wanted him to see. A name appeared repeatedly. Tyler J. It was on a dinner receipt, a flight itinerary, even a shared document. Ethan stared at the screen, the names circling his mind like a vulture. He didn't recognize it, had never heard her mention it. He searched it with numb fingers, piecing together LinkedIn profiles, social posts, digital fragments. Then, there he was. Tyler Jameson. Marketing consultant. Based in their city. Smiling in a photo taken the same weekend, she was supposedly networking in Chicago. Worse still, he found a tagged post. Her, in sunglasses, blurry but unmistakable, walking beside Tyler at an outdoor cafe. It had only one comment: cute couple. Ethan's heart clenched. She hadn't even tried to erase the traces. He wasn't just betrayed, he was invisible in her other life. A placeholder. A background character in a love story he didn't know was being written without him. Ethan rehearsed it a dozen times. In the mirror, in the car, even whispering in the shower. What he'd say. How he'd say it. He imagined her reaction. Shock. Tears, excuses. But when she walked through the door that evening, humming lightly, setting her purse down like everything was fine, he couldn't do it. Not yet. He watched her move around their apartment with effortless familiarity, commenting on dinner, asking about his day. And in that moment he realized something. She had no idea the war raging inside him. That was her power. She moved through deception like water, untouched and graceful. Ethan smiled politely, nodded, said, work was fine. But behind his eyes, a storm brewed. Because now he needed more than just the truth. He needed to understand who she really was. And that meant watching a little longer before breaking the illusion. And soon, their anniversary came and went. No card, no message, no dinner plans. Ethan waited all day, half hoping she'd remember. She didn't. She came home late, claimed she had drinks with clients. He nodded, said nothing. But inside, the silence was deafening. 3 years together. And now, nothing. Not even a mention. It wasn't just the lie anymore, it was the erosion of care. That day used to mean something. The first kiss. The midnight dance in the kitchen. The way she once called him her safe place. Now, she didn't even look him in the eye when she walked past. Ethan sat with a candle burning on the table, untouched takeout growing cold. He didn't need her to say, I love you. He just wanted her to remember. But she didn't. And that forgetfulness hurt more than any betrayal could. She cried once. Quietly. In the bathroom, behind a closed door. Ethan heard it through the walls, a faint stifled sob between the sound of running water. He stood in the hallway, paralyzed. Was it guilt? Regret? Or something else entirely? He didn't ask. He couldn't. Because to ask would be to admit he was listening. And part of him didn't want to know. When she emerged minutes later, her face was composed, her smile rehearsed. Can you grab milk tomorrow? She asked casually. Ethan nodded. But in that moment, something shifted. Maybe she wasn't heartless. Maybe she just didn't know how to stop. Or maybe the tears weren't even about him at all. That's what haunted him most. The possibility that her guilt wasn't about betraying him, but about hurting the man she was now hiding. And that made him feel small. Replaceable. Ethan sat across from the hotel concierge, his hands clammy, his pulse in his ears. He had called ahead, saying he'd lost a receipt from a business stay and needed verification. It was a lie, but they bought it. The receptionist printed the invoice, and then offered more. "We also have security footage if needed," she said. Ethan nodded slowly, feigning professionalism. 30 minutes later he sat in a small dim office, watching grainy footage from the hotel's lobby. And there she was, walking in, holding hands with Tyler Jameson. Her laugh was visible, her head on his shoulder. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. He just watched the truth he already knew solidify into something real. She looked happy, not guilty. And that, more than anything, shattered him. This wasn't a mistake. This was her new reality. And he had no place in it. Back home, Ethan confronted the calendar entry again. Chicago Conference, March 14, 17. He pulled up her email, cross-referencing times, dates and photos she'd sent him. One by one, they unraveled. The hotel she claimed to be in wasn't even in Chicago. The metadata from a photo she sent showed it was taken in their own city. Another email said she was at a panel discussion. Ethan found the event had been canceled due to weather. The deeper he went, the more the lie bled into everything. She hadn't just covered her tracks poorly. She had been confident he wouldn't look. And she'd been right, until now. Every thread Ethan pulled exposed another deception. She wasn't hiding an affair. She was building a parallel life. And he had been the blind spot, the silent pillar she leaned on while loving someone else. He dialed her number with shaking fingers. She answered on the second ring. "Hey? Everything okay?" Her voice was smooth, casual. Ethan took a long breath. "Where are you?" he asked. A pause. "At the office." "Why?" He didn't reply right away. Just listened to the background. Quiet, no office noise, no voices, no city hum. "You're not at work," he said calmly. Another pause. "What are you talking about?" she said sharper now. Ethan closed his eyes. "I know. About the hotel, about Tyler." Silence. A silence that stretched and thickened like fog. Then came the sigh. Not panicked. Not tearful. Just tired. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said. And that was it. No apology. No plea. Just a resignation that confirmed it all. Ethan hung up before she could say more. It was over. Clean. Hollow. Irreversible. She came home later that night. Ethan was in the kitchen, not cooking, just standing. She walked in, quietly placed her purse on the counter, and looked at him. He turned. Their eyes met. No screaming. No drama. Just silence. She stepped forward, lips parting to speak, but no words came. He studied her face. Not the one he had loved blindly, but the one she wore now. Tired. Distant. Dull. Resigned. "How long?" he asked. She looked down. "Since December." "That was 4 months ago." "Yeah." He nodded once, slowly. "Did you love him?" She hesitated. "I don't know." And that was worse than a yes. Because it meant he hadn't been enough, and neither was the other man. It was all just drifting. She wasn't choosing love. She was choosing escape. And Ethan realized he had never been part of her future. Just part of her past. That night, Ethan packed a bag, not for her to leave, but for himself. It wasn't out of pride. It was for survival. As he folded shirts into the duffel, she stood in the doorway watching. "You don't have to go," she whispered. He paused. "Yes, I do," he replied. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay the wreckage of trust, the ache of memory. She didn't beg. She didn't follow. She just stepped aside. And as he walked out, he didn't slam the door. He closed it gently, as if sealing a chapter rather than igniting a war. The cold air outside hit him like a baptism. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he was finally choosing himself. For the first time in months, maybe years, Ethan felt something real. Not anger, not sorrow, but clarity. And that was the beginning. The apartment was quiet without him. She moved through the space like a ghost, brushing her fingers along the countertops, pausing in the hallway where his coat used to hang. Every room held traces of him. The drawer half empty. The tea mug he always used. The dent in the couch where he'd sit after work. She stood in the bedroom doorway, unsure if she should change the sheets or leave them as they were. Guilt settled in her like dust. Quiet, clinging, impossible to wipe clean. She had expected him to shout, to fight, to try and win her back. But he didn't. He simply left. That was the part she couldn't escape. His silence screamed louder than anything. And now, in the echo of her choices, she realized too late. She had broken something that wouldn't be rebuilt. James opened the door before Ethan even knocked. "You look like hell," he said with a wry smile. Ethan gave a tired nod. "I feel worse." The guest room wasn't much, just a bed, a chair, and a dusty old bookshelf. But it felt like a sanctuary. James didn't ask many questions. He just handed Ethan a beer, turned on the game, and let the silence speak for them both. Later that night, Ethan finally muttered, "She didn't even fight for me." James didn't reply immediately. Then, softly, he said, "That's not your fault. Some people don't know what they have until it's gone, and even then, some don't care enough to chase it." Ethan didn't cry, but something inside him settled. Maybe it was the comfort of a friend, or maybe it was knowing that even in the wreckage, he wasn't alone. At a park they once frequented, Ethan sat alone on the old bench beneath the maple tree. They had carved their initials into it the first summer they moved in together. He traced the faded letters with a fingertip, heart aching. It wasn't just about her. It was about who he had been with her. The man who made plans, who laughed too loudly at her jokes, who imagined anniversaries with children and wrinkled hands. That version of him felt distant now. He stared at the path where they used to walk, hand in hand, and realized he had to grieve more than a relationship. He had to grieve the future he once believed in. Love didn't die in a day. It dissolved in quiet heartbreaks, in moments unnoticed until it was too late. And now, surrounded by the scent of spring, Ethan began letting go. The message came late, 2:13 a.m. Just one line, "I miss you." Ethan stared at the screen, phone glowing in his hand, like a whisper in the dark. He read it 3 times, expecting more. But there was nothing else. No apology. No explanation. Just longing without action. For a moment, he considered replying. His fingers hovered over the keys. He wanted to ask why now, why at all. But then he remembered the silence when he needed her most, the way she watched him walk out and said nothing. That wasn't love. That was comfort crumbling into absence. He turned the phone off and set it down, heart calm but firm. Letting go wasn't easy, but returning would be betrayal of himself. And finally, Ethan understood that some doors must remain closed. Not out of bitterness, but because they no longer lead anywhere. Standing in front of the mirror, Ethan barely recognized himself. Dark circles framed his eyes, and a beard he never intended to grow shadowed his jaw. But beneath the weariness, something else emerged, resilience. He had survived the unthinkable. Not just her betrayal, but the way it made him question everything about himself. And slowly, piece by piece, he was rebuilding. He straightened his shoulders. No grand revelation. No dramatic vow. Just a man, scarred but standing. He picked up his keys, tucked the folder of evidence deep into the closet, and whispered to his reflection, "You did the hard part. Now live." The mirror didn't answer. But it didn't need to. Because Ethan no longer needed validation from someone else's eyes. He was finally enough, in his own. Ethan stood outside Tyler Jameson's office building, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, heart pounding with 1,000 imagined confrontations. He had the photos, the receipts, the messages, proof enough to burn them both. Part of him wanted to go in, slam the evidence on a desk, and shatter Tyler's perfect world the way his had been. He imagined the look on Tyler's face, the guilt, the panic. But then he paused. What would that give him? Would it heal him? Or would it just make him someone else's ghost? Ethan turned away. Revenge was seductive, but it offered no peace. He didn't want to spend his strength proving her wrong or exposing him. He wanted something purer. Freedom, unto closure. His heart didn't need justice, it needed release. And sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do is walk away from a fight that no longer serves him. That night, Ethan opened a blank email draft. He began typing, "You broke me," then paused. Deleted it. Tried again. "I wish I could hate you." Another pause. Backspace again. He stared at the blinking cursor as though it could explain everything he felt, but couldn't say. What do you write to someone who hollowed you out without apology? He poured his heart into paragraphs, his pain, his confusion, the silent nights, the betrayal's weight. When he finished, he read it twice, then hovered over send. But he didn't click. He saved it as a draft, closed the lid of his laptop, and exhaled. Some words are meant to be said. Others are meant to be written and buried. That night he slept for the first time in weeks. Because forgiveness isn't always about letting them off the hook. Sometimes it's about letting yourself off the chain. The bookstore smelled of old paper and rain. Ethan wandered through the aisles, letting his fingers brush worn spines. It wasn't planned, he just needed a place to be, away from the memories. That's when he saw her. Not her, someone new. She was reading in the corner, laughing softly at something on the page. Their eyes met for just a second. She smiled. He smiled back. No sparks, no faded strings, just a simple human moment. He didn't approach, didn't say a word. But he felt it, something warm, something alive. A sign, maybe, that healing was possible. That love wasn't dead, just dormant. That the version of him she broke wasn't the only version that could exist. There would be no rebound, no rushing. But there would be a beginning. And beginnings often arrive as quiet gifts in the most ordinary places. Ethan visited his father for the first time since the breakup. They sat on the porch, coffee in hand, the silence between them unforced. After a while, his father spoke. "You know, your mother once broke my heart too, before we got married." Ethan turned, surprised. His father smiled faintly. "She got scared, pulled away. I could have let her go. But I waited. Not because I was weak, but because I knew what I wanted." Ethan nodded slowly. "And what if she never came back?" His father sipped his coffee. "Then I'd have moved on. You don't wait for people who aren't searching for you. But you also don't run from the pain. You walk through it. That's how you grow into the kind of man you're proud to be." Ethan didn't reply, but the words landed deep. Healing wasn't linear, but neither was strength. Weeks later, Ethan stood before the mirror again. Same face, but the eyes clearer, shoulders straighter. He shaved the beard, trimmed his hair, wore a clean shirt that fit right. Not for her, not for anyone, for himself. He didn't need to reclaim the past. He only needed to carry forward the lessons it carved into him. He reached for the cologne he'd stopped wearing, gave himself one nod and whispered, "Let's go." The man looking back wasn't broken anymore. He had cracks, sure, but that's where the light got in. He left the apartment, locking the door behind him not with finality but with freedom. There would be other days, other people, other stories. But today was his. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. It happened months later. A rainy afternoon, a grocery store, 2 carts passing in the same aisle. Ethan looked up, and there she was. Her eyes widened, lips parted, as if words might follow. But they didn't. He didn't flinch, didn't speak. Just nodded once, polite and distant. She looked different. Tired. Smaller somehow. She clutched a basket with trembling fingers, and for a moment the silence between them stretched like a tightrope. Then she spoke. "You look good." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I am." That was it. No blame. No accusations. Just two people caught in the shadow of who they used to be. She turned away first. As she walked off, he didn't feel anger, didn't feel sadness. He felt relief. Because seeing her didn't reopen the wound. It reminded him how far he'd come from it. That night, Ethan opened the drawer and pulled out the folder labeled Truth. Inside were the hotel receipts, emails, photos, everything he had once clung to. He sat at his desk and began writing. A letter, not to her, but to himself. He wrote about heartbreak and healing. About how some people leave holes and others leave lessons. He wrote about love, how it shouldn't require blindness to survive. And finally, he wrote the words he never thought he'd mean, "I forgive you." Not because she earned it, but because he deserved the peace that came with it. He folded the letter, placed it in the folder, and tucked it away in the back of the closet, not to be reread, but to be laid to rest. Closure didn't come in confrontation. It came in quiet decisions to stop carrying what no longer served him. Ethan moved into a new apartment, a smaller space, but filled with light. No ghosts. No echoes of betrayal. Just empty walls, waiting for new memories. He painted one wall navy blue, bought plants he swore he'd never keep alive, and left space on the shelves for books he hadn't read yet. There was no rush to redefine himself. No pressure to prove healing. He didn't need to post pictures or announce milestones. The proof was in the morning coffee he made without grief, in the mirror he looked into without self-doubt. He was rebuilding, brick by brick, choice by choice. Not from scratch, but from strength. Because surviving heartbreak isn't the story. Rising from it is. And Ethan, quiet, steady, and whole, was rising. On a quiet Saturday, Ethan walked to the park with the folder tucked under his arm. The same bench, the same tree, only this time, he didn't sit in mourning. He opened the folder one last time, thumbed through the contents. Then, one by one, he fed the pages into a small fire pit beside the path. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished in smoke. No fanfare. No tears. Just release. As the last receipt turned to ash, Ethan exhaled deeply. Not in sadness, but in peace. He wasn't erasing history. He was honoring it, and finally, letting it rest. When he stood and walked away, he didn't look back. Some stories don't need closure. They just need endings. And he had given his the quietest, most powerful one possible. Weeks later, Ethan sat at a cafe by the window, journaling. A stranger across the table caught his eye. A gentle smile, a question about the book he was reading. They talked just for a while. It wasn't electric. It wasn't fate. It was real. And when she laughed, he didn't think of the past. He just smiled. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something new. Messy. Quiet. Honest. As he left the cafe, a drizzle began to fall. He didn't run. He let it touch him, cleanse him. And as he stepped into the street, the voice of the narrator whispered what Ethan now knew to be true. Sometimes, the most painful truths are the ones that finally set us free.